After years of being beaten, first by Ford and then by their German rivals Porsche, Ferrari wasn't ready to stay down, and they fought back with their new machine, the 512M. This ferocious V12 monster of a car had the top speed, had the sound, and it had the heart of a champion, even if the wins never actually really came. And today, we're going to build it.
This set is 291 pieces of racing history. While we build, I'll share the car's stats, legendary races, and what made it special and why you may never see one on the road today. And at the end, we'll put it to the test on our LEGO lap track to see if it can beat the Countach.
Alright, here we go, and welcome back to my channel. This is a fresh build, so I get to open this box in front of you all. First time seeing this, no idea how complicated this will be as I'm going into it. As mentioned in my previous build, I had two cars that I had rebuilt or had built before. The first one was the Lamborghini Countach. I have one other that I'm not going to build on the channel, but I might do a quick review. And then I had a Technic, which will be later down the road, which I started but never finished. I only got maybe not even through the first bag, to be honest, on that one. So, but that's not what you're here to see. So the Ferrari 512M, the M stands for Modificata, which was introduced in 1970 as an upgrade to the Ferrari 512S. So that's what the M is for. As I show off the stickers here to you for the first time. The stickers for this one wasn't too bad, I'll be honest. They mostly were larger ones and not too many. Of course, later on you'll see I still struggle with stickers. Anybody that's got some good tips for stickers, that would be greatly appreciated, because stickers in me, not overall my strength when it comes to building these. Anyways, we'll flip through the manual book here as I comment on it. I feel like this book is thicker than the Countach. Let's go into it. And in good old beard meets food fashion, I'll comment on my comments. It is thicker by quite a bit. They came prepared with this book. So right here, I noticed right away, and you can see me pointing it out on screen, the first instruction I find kind of humorous. The first instruction is open the box and empty it. And yet the instruction booklet is contained in the box, so you wouldn't even know the first instruction without seeing it. Now, of course, we all know, yeah, you gotta open the box to do it anyways, but I still just find it kind of humorous. So they take the time to list an instruction of opening and emptying the contents of the box. So we'll go ahead and open up the bag, and while we do that, let me go ahead and give you some of these other facts about this Ferrari. Honestly, I didn't know a lot about this Ferrari, and this Ferrari wasn't one that had like a significance to me before researching for this. I had to actually dive into some articles here, and I can see why it's important and why LEGO decided to make a speed version of it. First of all, it's powered by a 5-liter V12 engine, which produced 610 horsepower at 9,000 RPM. 610 horsepower in 1970, that's a lot of horsepower, and this car was not a heavy car, so a lot of power in this car. That 600 horsepower could propel it over 211 miles an hour, which is absolutely bonkers for 1970. They were, trying to catch up with those GT40 times, which could do 200 plus. 0 to 60 time was in 3.0 to 3.2, so sub 4 second. There's not a lot of cars today that are doing sub 4 second unless they're electric. So very, very quick. It was a rear wheel drive, made it to a 5-speed manual gearbox, and there were only ever 25 built, making it one of the rarest Ferrari race cars ever. It was built specifically for Group 5 sports car racing series it was to take on the Porsche 917, as mentioned in the intro. Porsche was dominating at the time, so kind of for those that aren't familiar and want to learn about this, maybe you've seen Ford v Ferrari. Ferrari dominated for quite a long time in the racing scene, especially in the endurance racing scene, and Ford wanted the challenge due to the events in Ford where he wanted to buy Ferrari, and then Fiat bought him out instead. And so Ford built his own racing car to go at it. But then after Ford finished up with their run, which I believe was 4 years straight, might have been 6, but I think it was 4 years straight, along comes this German manufacturer named Porsche. And we got some Porsches we'll talk about later. And Porsche took over and was dominating the endurance racing scene for quite a while. So it'd been a bit since Ferrari had been on top. And they decided to make this car in order to try to fight back. This is Ferrari. This is, their legacy, their history. They weren't going down without a fight. So straight to the new drawing boards and kind of came out with this car here. And specifically to take on the Porsche 917, which was dominating. So there were never any official road-going versions that was made. This was a pure race machine, and it was never ever meant to be street legal. Today, these Ferrari 512Ms can fetch between $4 to $7 million per car, depending on condition, race history, and provenance. So a couple of fun, interesting stories, but first I'm showing off this guy here. Kind of zoomed in, you might have missed it. Unlike the Lamborghini, the guy here only has one side for a face. The Lamborghini had two sides, but he's got kind of a cool little smirk on him, and I kind of like to joke that it's because he knows he's driving a Ferrari. He knows he's driving one of the fastest cars of its time. So kind of show him off there with his hair on versus his helmet. Then we'll set him to the side so he can watch his car get assembled. So by 1969, Ford GT40 had humiliated Ferrari for 4 straight years. So it was 4 years at Le Mans specifically. Le Mans is the big one. There are many endurance races. We're going to talk about a few. But like the big one, the one that everybody seems to care about, the one that gets the most attention is Le Mans, which is in France. And it's actually a road course. You can go drive on part of it every day. They close it down obviously for Le Mans, but there's parts of that track that are actual streets for anybody that's there. But after Ford had exited the scene, Ferrari hoped to reclaim dominance, only to be met by an even tougher challenger, Porsche, who I mentioned. Porsche launched the 917, which was faster, lighter, and a lot more reliable. Ferrari rushed out with a 512S to actually meet that in 1969, but it struggled with weight and reliability. So then the 512M, which is the Modificata, that's why the M, was Ferrari's final push to regain control of the endurance racing. It had refined aerodynamics, better weight distribution, and more power. Who doesn't love more power? I gotta do that. So they entered quite a few races, and unfortunately, the Ferrari overall didn't have a lot of success in beating Porsche. They kind of called it a cursed car in a way, just because it just always seemed to still run into issues, and it was competitor. It was fighting for first, but I guess spoiler alert, Porsche still won the majority of the time. But there was one specific race, and this race was early on after they had introduced the M. It was in 1970, and it was the Sebring race. So Sebring, which I believe is in California, I've not been to the racetrack, but I'm pretty sure it is. I just don't have the facts up in front of me. Is a 12-hour endurance race. So 12 hours straight, driven by 2 drivers. So they can switch out. One driver's not driving 12 hours straight. So it is considered one of the greatest races in endurance history. And this car, along with the Porsche that it was competing against, is the reason why. At the 12 hours in Sebring in 1970, Mario Andretti, for those that just know racing or American racing, Andretti's a huge name in American racing. He's been around since then. He was a race car driver. He's heavily in Indy. He's making an F1 team now, actually, for those that are interested, Cadillac, with Mario Andretti. And the co-driver, Arturo Marzaro, were in the Ferrari 512S. So near the end, they lost the lead to the Porsche 908-02. It's 908/02. Do I know what the slash means? No, I don't. I'm sorry. But that Porsche was driven by none other than Steve McQueen. Yes, the movie star Steve McQueen. A guy who starred in Bullitt, starred in Le Mans, and a bunch of other movies of the time. He was a huge actor. For those that maybe are wondering who Steve McQueen is, if you're not familiar.
If these are going to cover it up, why not just like a bigger block in there? I wonder, because I mean, we might see something later in the design, but these little slant pieces, from what I can tell, I mean, yeah, they give a little bit of structural strength right here, but they overall, I mean, you get structural strength from like, you know, building up a couple of two pieces in there. I just don't understand it, but once again, I'm not the geniuses over that are designing these, so maybe we'll see in a bit. But interesting kind of just choice, in my opinion.
Question about why they chose the design they did. I found that very fascinating. Obviously, I tried to zoom in for y'all so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It seems like it would have just been easier to do blocks. But anyways, back to the story. So Steve McQueen, the movie star, he is racing in this. Not only that, this has Steve McQueen, and he's driving with a broken foot. I went and read the stories on this, and he had a cast on his foot, and it was his right foot, I believe. And after a couple of days of them being at the track, the race hasn't started yet. You know, they've got practice, they've got qualifying, all that. His pit crew had actually went and tried to paint his shoe, or paint his boot on his broken foot to look like a shoe, so it would be less noticeable. And there was a lot of small modifications being made to his Porsche to try to make it to where he could still drive comfortably. Now, due to his broken foot, he was actually the secondary driver in this race. He was carried a little bit more by his teammate at the time, but mostly just due to his injury. So, Steve McQueen racing in the Porsche. Now, with an hour left, Ferrari had led almost the whole time, up until I think it was about 2 hours, to be honest. They ran into a little bit of issues, so they pitted, they addressed those issues, and then back out on the track, and they actually came back out in third. They were overtaken by two different Porsche teams, one by McQueen's team and the other one by another Porsche team. But real quick here, you can hear me complain about the stickers, and then we'll finish the story.
See, besides the little mark I left on it, which drives me nuts, it's the tire, or it's not the tire, the gauges, the tach, the speedometer, fuel, I'm guessing. They didn't have as many gauges back then, not as many sensors. But yeah, it annoys me. I already marred it up a little bit because I put it on upside down. Did I still do it upside down? I just re-put it back on exactly the same way I had it, didn't I? Son of a gun. Try to mar up the same corner, I guess, since I already marred it up. This way. Ay, ay, ay.
Stickers. I always struggle with stickers. So once again, if you got any advice on how to put these on better, I mean, this one's my fault. I put it on upside down twice. But yeah, so one thing I noticed as I put this in, because I'm about to install the steering wheel here, is it goes right in front of it. And I kind of pointed out, but if I were the Lego man, I don't know if I'd be able to see the gauges there. I find that kind of funny, but hey, it's Legos, right? So back to the story. So what had happened is two Porsches had passed up Mario Andretti, and they had put Mario Andretti back in when they were basically in third place. The Porsche in the lead ran into a mechanical issue, so they withdrew. And so then it's Steve McQueen in his Porsche. Technically, I don't think Steve McQueen was driving at the time, but the Porsche of Steve McQueen's team versus Mario Andretti in the Ferrari. And Mario Andretti just went, he just hit it, got in the zone, and he managed to overtake Steve McQueen right towards the end of the race. And Andretti and Ferrari won that race by 23 seconds, which is a large gap if you're used to F1. But for this type of racing, that is one of the closest races ever. And at the time, it was the closest endurance race finish. So they'd managed to overtake him with just I think less than an hour to go, and then win that race. And that was a big race and a big moment for Ferrari. So footage from that race was actually later used in the filming of McQueen's movie called Le Mans. So if you want to see footage of this legendary Sebring race, you can go watch the movie Le Mans. It was making one of the few times a real endurance race became part of film history, by the way. So I'll have a link down to that story in the stuff down below. I can't think of it at the moment, but if you want to go read about that story a little bit more, it's a fascinating story. There's also a few other links there. So overall, really cool. But in the end, that was really the only real big win I could find, and that was technically by the 512S. So the 512M wasn't in that. Despite its raw power, though, the 512M couldn't match Porsche's factory-backed dominance. Ferrari factory team pulled out in 1971, leaving privateers to carry the torch. So they only did the 5M from 1970 to 1971. 69 was the S, I believe. So they just couldn't keep up, and Porsche was able, with their factory, just to keep winning. But one of the biggest names to buy as a privateer team to buy these Ferraris was Roger Penske. I believe there's a tool company named after him now, in case you're curious. But Roger Penske was into racing, and he owned a race team. So he happened to buy one of these 512Ms. And what he did with this 512M was, at the time, considered kind of crazy, but in the end was also innovative. So Roger Penske bought a 512M chassis and rebuilt it from the ground up. So it's still a Ferrari, but he rebuilt it from the ground up. Him and his driver, Mark Donahue, transformed it into a precision weapon. They improved the brakes, they added some lightweight panels and advanced aerodynamics, and the car was prepped like no other. Color-coded parts, lightning-fast pit tools, aerospace-style preparation. So not only that, and there's a video actually with one of the drivers for Penske. I'll also link below. It's I think it's a 12-minute watch where they actually show this Ferrari that I'm talking about. And here's a picture of it. I'll put it up right here for you all, and you guys can kind of see it. But what they had done is they had taken preparation for races, which at the time was kind of unheard of, a whole new level. As I mentioned, color-coded parts. They actually practiced pit stops and stuff like that, and they prepped in a way that was much more professional. And at the time, I read an article on this too. They kind of actually mentioned, or maybe it was in the video, that a lot of the European cars, they would kind of scoff at Penske because they would even go and polish the car between runs and stuff like that and make it look nice and fancy and clean and all that. And they would kind of scoff at him and oh, what's it matter how it looks as long as it goes fast? And they quickly learned that preparation was kind of important. So with this rebuilt M, could you call it a modified modificata? Maybe they should call it the 512MM. Anyways, they were going to enter it into 4 endurance races. So the first endurance race was at Daytona, and they put the car out there, and it took pole position, which the Ferraris haven't been able to do against the Porsches in years. So they just they blew them off blew the doors off, and kind of a big upset in a way because nobody saw it coming, and they took pole position. They then, of course, got damaged and wasn't able to finish the race, but it wasn't due to mechanical failure. It was quite literally due to damage. So then they entered in the Sebring, and same thing. took pole position. But once again, they never won. They were plagued by crashes, gearbox failures, and other curses. So it's a historic car, and it's actually quite a pretty car with a Sunoco blue. As once again, there's that picture there that I posted a little bit earlier. But what it did do is it changed the way that race car or race teams approach races. They started to work better on the way they had their parts labeled and set aside for pit stops, pre-race drills, stuff like that, in order to add preparation. And so even though the car still never won, a lot of people credit this car with changing the way racing was done. And it's more of what we kind of expect today, where it's a very, very precise, everything's engineered exactly as it should be. Things aren't just kind of thrown together and say, oh, that'll work or whatever. It's very precision, and this is what the car that started that trend. They say basically what Penske's team did was revolutionary. They set the standard for how professional endurance racing teams operate today. So I found that quite interesting. As we kind of dive into this a little bit more, looks like I'm about halfway through and I'm applying some more stickers here, and the way the stickers go. Get these on. You can see on one side, I don't quite make the stickers line up right. It drives me nuts. But on the other side, I am able to get them aligned. Am I recording? Because my recording thing says it's spinning, and I can't tell. I might have to cut this because I don't know if it's recording or not. Looks like it is. It just took a little bit of a lag. Hopefully that's not too whatever. But yeah, I don't get the stickers quite lined up on one side because there's two stickers that are lined up. And once again, asking somebody with my sticker skills to line up lines across two different blocks of two different stickers. Maybe for an average, well, I'm an average Joe, right? Maybe for people that do this all the time, they can do it. But me, a little bit of a struggle. I did better on the second one though. So we'll start the second bag here and kind of sort some pieces as we go through this build. Overall, this build was it took me longer than the last build, I believe, and that's not due to the experience I had of building the last car. I built the last car like 2 years ago. I didn't remember how to build it, but more so I was surprised by that time just due to the fact that it did feel like a simpler build. Like the Lamborghini had some interesting mechanics to make things curve, and this one, the only thing that felt like that was innovative or kind of a clever way to do things was the front. The front end, especially the way the lights and that slope, which we'll get to here in a little bit, the way they kind of were able to make it to where it could do that was pretty cool. But other than that, everything else was pretty much flat. So it wasn't all that crazy. You can see as I'm doing the back, it's just all a big flat wing on a flat chassis or chassis, and yeah, nothing too crazy. So while I continue to build this, I believe the reason why LEGO made this car and why the 512M still actually matters in today's world is, even though it may not have been Ferrari's most successful car, it was part of an era that defined what endurance racing could be. With the GT40 dropping out, Porsche and Ferrari, this is when I believe endurance racing was at its peak with people and viewership, fans. It was the big racing style at the time, and endurance racing still happens today, but I don't think it's as big as F1 or NASCAR or Indy, to be honest. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm a little bit ignorant to it because it's not as big in the US. Maybe it is across the world, but it just feels like it's I hear the headlines about who won Le Mans and stuff, but I don't even know any other endurance races besides Daytona. So anyways, it was a big part of that era. It carried the hopes of a company that had been knocked down, first by Ford and then by Porsche, but it still chose to fight. Ferrari doesn't give up. They've got that heritage, they've got that prestige they want to live up to, and Enzo was still in charge here. Enzo Ferrari, the same guy who was involved with the GT40, as a rival and stuff like that. He was a very proud man, and he had built Ferrari up to be this legacy and this almost mythical type racing team that just couldn't be beat until they were. So he didn't want to go out, down at the bottom. He wants to control and win, as anybody that's competitive does. So, and it's rare, it's beautiful, and it's also loud. It's one of the last analog V12 monsters that Ferrari ever unleashed. So after this, I believe endurance racing changed to where they had to go to smaller engines, and I think they had to go back to V8s, if I recall. So because of that, this is one of the last V12s that Ferrari was putting in race cars, and before they had to go back down to V8s. So I found that kind of interesting as well. Overall, like I said, I don't have a lot of history of this car. As a kid, I didn't know about this car. I was definitely into sports cars and stuff, but I was into cars that I could own. And race cars, I could own if I were rich. We'll say it that way. Race cars, though, were not considered something you buy. Even if you're wealthy, I'm sure the super wealthy could buy them. But, unless you owned a race team, you don't buy a race car. So I didn't really follow what they were putting out for race cars. Instead, I followed more of what they were putting out for consumers. And this is also a little before my time. In the 1970s, obviously I'm into classic cars, but I know of the Ferrari dyno and stuff like that, but I didn't really know about the M or the 512M, so just kind of a wrong era there. Here I'm pointing out the undercarriage. This is one thing I really liked about this build, is they really were careful to not just have it kind of square off for the undercarriage, but to give it those rounded undercarriages or an bottom part of the body to make sure that it was rounded as they were. Because race cars, the way the air flows underneath it, even in the 70s, is a lot more important than you might think. So making sure that the aerodynamics just aren't on the top of the car, but underneath it, was very important. And the way that they made this rounded on both sides underneath and kind of took some time to build that undercarriage, I think is important, and also speaks to at least the attention to detail by the people designing these cars, not just in real life, but in LEGO. It's kind of important to make sure you get those little things like that right, because you could just, nobody looks under the car is the perception, but people that actually are paying attention to these cars, they might be, and knowing that this is where the mufflers are, this is how this kind of slopes down underneath. Now it doesn't have the whole underside like where everything is, where you can see the tailpipe going all the way, of course, but at least paying attention to the way it would be perceived if you saw the car on the track and kind of got down on your knees to try to look underneath it and stuff is important to this type of stuff. So I do like the color scheme. There was a lot of red pieces in this build, along with the white. So overall, made it a little bit harder to find some of the pieces when I need them because there's so much red. But the car itself, it's called Ferrari red for a reason. So you kind of have to make most of them red. couple of where you can see I had to go back one earlier and a little bit here on just making sure I get pieces aligned right. I like to think that I pay attention to detail pretty well, but I admit on this one there were a couple of mistakes that were due to lack of paying attention, where I just had a piece slightly misaligned or something like that, which caused me to go back a couple of pages or have to adjust something slightly. I need to do better at that, but overall I think everybody makes little minor mistakes when they don't see things fit the way they are, but more so it's not due to bad instructions, it's just due to me not able to follow instructions or think I know what I'm doing. Right here I have to line up these stickers, the number 4 and then the one that goes on the undercarriage. Once again, aligning stickers, I feel like I do a pretty decent job on these ones and the one on the other side, but aligning stickers, not a strong point. And you can see I've got to put this one on a couple times before I get it. I feel like I get it pretty close. It looks decent, but I like the other side more. Also, one other interesting fact that I kind of, if you were watching the video, I didn't talk to it, so it's telling the story. All the little single red pieces have a little Ferrari sign on them. And at first that threw me because I thought, oh, there's only a couple that, this is where the emblem's going to be. But it turns out all of them do. And there I'm pointing it out right now. See, that Ferrari sign is actually showing there versus earlier where I was like, what's the point of having this sign here if I'm going to cover it up? But because all of them have it, you just got to make sure that you have that single piece pointing the right direction. But you don't have to sit there and find the only 2 single pieces in a pack of 20 to pull aside. You just got to make sure you line them up so you can see that Ferrari emblem. Like I said, that confused me at first, but once I realized what they had done, I could see why they did it. Also makes it to where if you happen to lose one of those pieces, it's not as big of a deal. There's a couple of replacements or something like that. So here we're building the front end. We're getting close to that innovative way that they did the front. You can see there was that like pipe type thing, or that, I call it a pipe. But what they do is they make it click on there, and we'll get there in a second, so maybe I'm spoiling slightly, but as I build this for you, one, you have to build these things kind of almost upside down, but you can see that slides onto there, just like that, upside down looking almost, and that's the beginning of what we're going to build for our headlights go. Now we got to do both sides, and of course I put it the wrong way, because it has to be one for the right, one for the left. And you can see they move, but in the final build they're not meant to move, but you can see they move right now because they're on that pipe. There you can see I'm getting the clear part, that's the headlight itself. And we'll just wait here a second while I assemble this. So while we're waiting for this, one thing I was thinking is I have a limited space that I can have these. So there's a couple of these that I want to keep, like the Lamborghini. But I might, in the future, as I get to some other ones, after I finish building them, I might give them away and have a giveaway if I have an audience by then. Or if you're watching in the future and you come back to this one, and I'm already doing this, then I guess no surprises. But some of these, I don't have room to store them after I've done. So depending on the timing and if there's a viewership for this, I might do some giveaways on some of these later, where I take them back apart or ship them together, I guess, based on what the winner wants, and send those off to people just because of the space. I've already paid for them, but they would be free to the winners there. If you guys like that idea, and anybody's watching this, maybe comment down below. Yes, I should do some giveaways. And obviously those that are watching the earlier videos will have a higher chance of winning because, well, less people to compete with. But you can see I put on the one front end there as we build the second front end. And you can see an instruction booklet right now. That's kind of how that front end looks. And so getting that slope, once again, I did find that very clever on how they did that. And that's really the only part that, this car was impressive, but the only part that was like, oh, that's a smart way to go about that. To where the Lamborghini had a lot more curves, and yeah, as I'm comparing to the Lamborghini a lot, as it was the last build, had a lot more parts like that. They had to do some innovative ways to get the curves to work. And this one, all they had to do was get this front end right, which they do get right, by the way. It's still very innovative. It's just didn't feel like up until then there wasn't anything super crazy with this build. So as we're wrapping this up, I'm about done here. Overall, I found this car, the finished product it's a quite cool car, like whole to see in real time. It resembles the picture, it resembles the real life car. They did a good job of mimicking it. The overall build, even though it took me longer, I would consider it a pretty user-friendly build. If I wouldn't have messed up that one sticker, the stickers are actually a lot simpler than the last build. They're a lot bigger. So overall, the build itself, user-friendly wise, I would rate high, but also innovative on cleverness. I'm going to call it the cleverness factor. I would rate that low. The only clever parts, as I mentioned, was the way they did the front. The rest was fairly Lego-ish feeling. So when it comes to that cleverness, not so much. So really cool finished product, user-friendly build, user-friendly stickers, something that's gonna be like, oh, make you feel like that's a really genius way to do that. Not so much. And then overall coolness factor of this car, or I guess I'm gonna call it my connection to it, I'd say about medium. If I were gonna give these numbers, I'd say, okay, maybe I should do a rating factor. Let's do that. So overall finished product or coolness looking of the car, I'm gonna give it 9. It's a really cool car when it's all done. The build, ease of build, is a 7. And I'm gonna say though the innovation or the cleverness is like a 4 or 5. And then overall, my personal ratings of the car, like nostalgia factor or importance to me, I'm gonna give it a 5 as well there. Is it a car I would recommend if you're into an easier build? I'd say this is a lot more beginner or user friendly, and it is a cool car to own. Then I would say yes. If you're looking for something more complicated or something that's got some really cool innovative ways on how they built it, then I would say no. I would rank it below the Lamborghini in that sense, but it is still a very, very cool car, worth a purchase. Maybe not as your first Lego Speed, but definitely better than some. And it is a solid car. Like once it's put together, it feels like it's not going to fall apart in my hands. It's really great there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pose my guy here and act like a man-child for a little bit while I try to make the guy stand next to the car in different ways as if it were real, because I like to do that, give you guys a few views, and then we'll take it over to the test track and see if it can beat last week's competitor, a Lamborghini. If I could get the guy to stand. Side profile picture for you, as if it were like a real car and the guy's standing out there holding his helmet getting ready to drive. This car does roll really nice. Like if you were actually, I don't think a lot of people buy Legos to drive around and have fun with, but maybe they do. But it does roll really good across the table, and I think that leads to a better performance on the track when we get to it. But like I said, it is a solid car. It feels like I could drop it and it's not going to fall apart. So here we go on our test track. 116. It demolishes the Countach, and once again, I think it's just because it rolls really good. So with that, like, subscribe if you like this, and here's some other videos for you, but mostly just thank you for watching.